Okay, well,
I see so many familiar faces. It's so nice. Thank you so much, people, joining these programs. It's so cool.
okay, that's good. That's good. You can see all of my like grandparents' cookbooks, and then a bunch of like baby clothes that I have to put away from my youth. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so we have, yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this today. Sonnets are my favorite form of poetry. I put on my big fancy shirt just for this. Let me pull up my thingy, my PowerPoint. Can I do, oh man, every time okay. I don't like Zoom. There, okay. Can you see this? Okay, we can see that. I'm gonna make sure that I have the chat function on. Why am I so bad at Zoom? Okay, there's the chat. Okay, for me, so we can all see that. Put that to everybody. Go there, okay, I'll go there. Let me put this in present mode. Does that work? How are you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing well. I was at junior high earlier today. I saw some plants. I fed some plants. That was cool. That was about the extent of the random contact that I've had in the last like week or so. Yeah, doing well. I'm gonna cook some dinner after this, and then we have reading that Stoya is doing, which I'm excited about.
Beautiful.
Yeah, pretty solid Friday. How about you? How are you doing?
I woke up at 11, and then I've just been putting, I've just been preparing for this all day. It's been very nice.
That's awesome. Your hair looks great.
Huh?
Your hair looks great.
Thank you. I need to wash it.
Got some like.
Got a little. Okay, I'm gonna put on my lipstick, and then the workshop will officially start. Yeah. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Now That's What I Call a Sonnet. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite poetry form, sonnets. So here are some house rules. This workshop will be uploaded to Notacult's YouTube channel, so turn your camera off if you don't want to be part of the recording. We are reading aloud today, so don't be shy. When I'm asking for readers, just put your name in the chat, and then I will like pick whoever puts their name in first. And then also, as I'm talking, put any questions in the chat, and I will try to monitor it as I go. Zoom makes me go nuts, so I'm going to do my best to facilitate the discussion. Last time it was really helpful when other people saw someone that had a question and then like emphasize their name in the chat. You guys are so great. The last workshop was really so wonderful, and it makes me so happy that we can do this again, and that like everybody was such a beautiful conversation partner, and such a great part of the group. So I'm really excited to hopefully have that again today. And also, before we start, grab something to write with. This is going to be a writing heavy-ish workshop. I'm also going to be talking about a lot of things, so you may want to take notes. But yeah, definitely grab something to write with, journal, laptop, just have it pretty close to you. Okay. Just trying to situate. And you guys can see what's on my screen. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Daniel. So we are going to start out with a free write to clear the mind, and so we can fill it with even more stuff. So I have to get my phone so that I can keep time. But everybody make sure that you got your writing utensil. Okay. So we are going to just open up our journals or our notebooks or our laptops and just write for 5 minutes straight, whatever is coming through your mind. It can be like truly whatever you want. Just let your hands not stop moving for the full 5 minutes. I am starting the timer now. Okay, that's our time. That's 5 minutes. So finish that last thought. Beautiful. While you guys were writing, I clicked through and saw everybody's faces so deep in thought and creative energy. And it was so beautiful. I'm so excited to talk about sonnets with you guys today. So as we come out of that free write, let's do a little deep breath. Center ourselves. So I'm going to count it off. We're going to inhale 4 counts, hold 4 counts, exhale 4 counts, hold 4 counts. And we're going to do that 3 times. So inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, in 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, in 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4. Wonderful. Thanks. So we're gonna be doing a little breathing exercise after each of our free write sessions, just to keep things grounded. So today we're going to be talking about form and form in poetry, understanding form as both a reader and a writer of poetry. So why are we studying form in the first place? Shouldn't isn't real good poetry just like totally spontaneous and like you write whatever you want on the page and it just like goes on forever and it's like totally intuition based, and like all of that is true, and I love free verse, of course, but even within free verse there are aspects of form within that, right? Just the way that sentences and words and grammar is built together, and we are studying these rules so that we know how to break them. All of the sonnets that I'm going to talk to you about today do break the rules, and that is their extreme point. Like that's where they're the most innovative, right? That's where they're the most creative. They know and understand the boundaries of the sonnet very deeply, which is why they're able to like cartwheel over them. Also, form has existed for a really long time, the same way that language itself has existed for a very long time. I think, all of us want to be really original and creative and innovative, right? Just write things that no one has ever seen before. But if we wrote something that genuinely no one on the planet had ever seen before, it would be impossible to read and comprehend. Like there is always a legacy behind us. There's always an inheritance that we are part of, whether or not we're aware of it. So by studying form, we get to honor that poetic inheritance. So I'm going to be talking about like the sonnet is like primarily a European form. It began in Italy during the Renaissance, and then it came to England, and through there has been spread throughout English. And I think like when we think of form, it's very much to do with the canon, and people have a the canon has a terrible reputation for like very good reason, and because of that, like form has a terrible reputation for very good reason, because like the way that poetry is taught in so many public schools is so bad. uh like it has very little to do with actually like reading and enjoying poetry. It's just to like get your SAT marks, get like the standardized testing, pick the right, like, oh, I see this has a quatrain, therefore, I know which multiple choice answer to pick, right? I'm very grateful that like my first experience with the canon was through studying Shakespeare as a child. And like by studying, I mean performing it. There was like a theater troupe in my neighborhood that was led by like hippie Jewish moms. So this was my introduction to classical literature, and it was great because Shakespeare was not held up as something that was elite or out of reach, or like this is how it's supposed to be done, this is the only way that you can ever do it, and you'll never be as good as this. Shakespeare was just like something that we shouted at each other in silly costumes, and then we would have a snack afterwards, like every Wednesday. And then like I'm still to this day so grateful for how these women presented the, you know, Shakespeare to me, because they were like, oh, we're gonna make, you know, Shylock the main character of Merchant of Venice. You know, it was just so it was so revelatory, and I didn't even realize it because I was like 9 years old. So all of which is to say that I'm talking about like a European poetic device today, right? But that doesn't mean that it starts and ends in Europe, and that doesn't mean that every other linguistic tradition on this planet does not have its own poetic forms and inheritance, right? Like if there is a language, then poetry exists inside of it. So, you know, maybe there's talking about the sonnet today, but like this kind of tradition does not only exist in English. So we also love studying form because constraints can inspire creativity. This is most obvious to me when I'm teaching workshops for middle schoolers, because if I say, okay guys, you have 20 minutes, write a poem about anything that you want, anything at all, anything in the world, the paper will be blank by the end of the 20 minutes, because with so many options, what on earth do you possibly pick from, right? But if I say, okay guys, write a poem about a tree, then I will have lots and lots of, I will have a whole forest by the end of the class. So sometimes we need something to push up against in order to form a path. And that's true in writing, and that's true in life. We also love studying form. I love studying form because it brings extra flavor to poems, both as a writer and a reader. The blend of content and form and the way that these things inform each other is very important. And it's not like if I'm out in the wild, if I'm out reading in the wild and I see something that I recognize as a sonnet, right? The joy is not like, oh, I noticed the line structure, therefore that must be a sonnet, I'm really smart. The structure of the sonnet or any other form brings it makes the content sing, it adds more. Like the tools of the sonnet, the tools of any form, like guide poetry whether or not the reader recognizes that it's a sonnet, you know? And we're going to talk about that. This will this will hopefully be more apparent as I keep talking. But yes, I think studying form is very important, even though like I still work in free verse all the time. I'm still just shouting and still just like writing stuff. Mac just sneezed. Macaroni's on the ground behind me. He's my teaching assistant. I completely forgot what I was saying. Okay, next one. So we will be having writing exercises today, but they're not the typical free write that we started with, or the kind of free write that we had in the last workshop that I taught. Think of it more as, are you okay? Are you okay? Do you need to go out? Okay. Think of the writing exercises more as brainstorms. This is a form of research as writing. So we like studying form because it's a great way to develop discipline as a poet, right? And like if I sit down, you know, like I'm the same as a middle schooler. If I sit down and I'm like, okay, Rhiannon, write about anything, I am just staring at the wall for half an hour. But if I'm like, okay, today I'm going to try to write a sestina or a villanelle or a ghazal, then like something will get done because I have something to throw myself at directly. So, and this is also how we can become our own muse. You know, there's an idea of poetry as like this totally spontaneous, like, oh my God, I woke up in the night at 3 in the morning and I ran to my writing desk and got my quill and then scribbled out this perfect thing. And then it was immediately accepted and published in every cool magazine. And I won all of the awards, right? So that idea of spontaneity is like the first draft, or like taking notes on something, right? Like I think I've had exactly, and you know, like I'm a silly baby who is like 4 weeks away from getting her actual like English degree. Oh, hi kitty. Hi baby, the kitten. Okay, you want to say hi, Mac? We're gonna have a pet time. Hi, come here. There he is. writing bash. Okay. As I was saying, experience and expertise comes from lots of places. Like, I know some things. I would like to share them with you today. I am not the be all end all of poetic knowledge, but form is a great way to develop discipline. As a poet, we are able to inspire ourselves and move forward. So for me, often writer's block comes from not thinking enough about what I'm writing. Not from like, oh my God, I can't think of the next word to say or like the best way to phrase this. It's because like I haven't thought enough about what I'm trying to say in the poem in order to like actually make it move through the page. So the more brainstorming and research that I do makes the poem a lot easier to write when I'm actually writing the poem. And I really, so the same way that like Shakespeare, growing up, you know, performing Shakespeare taught me to not fear the canon, like being on slam teams and being in spoken word communities when I was in high school taught me to know what I'm saying when I'm saying a poem or writing a poem. I really thank, you know, my old slam coaches, Alicia Wise and Matthew Cuban Hernandez, for like making sure that every single poem that I wrote had a purpose. And I'm not saying that like the purpose can be, the purpose doesn't have to be to change the world, right? The purpose can be to like change your afternoon. The purpose can be to make someone else feel better. The purpose can be to remind yourself of something that you once loved or the way that you once felt. But to know exactly why you are writing this poem, it gives the poem more weight. It gives you more weight as a writer, and the reader can feel it even subconsciously. You know, this is another part of form. So all of which is to say that a lot of writing goes into writing that you don't necessarily see in the final book, right? So like the the book that I'm working on right now, it has a lot of sonnets. It works with a lot of like traditional forms, and for each of those poems there's like 10 pages of notes for each like page of poem that actually comes out. It's extensive, and it just like, for me, it makes it more fun as a writer, because I feel like also I have all of these like little fun secrets that no one else gets to see, that like I can see the full backstage of the poem. Anyway, this is all okay. Ooh, wait, Madison B. Okay, questions. How can we decide when to use function? Like, how can we analyze which form or lack thereof works with specific topics? Okay, so for the sonnet, we can talk about that later. A lot of the best way to familiarize yourself with forms is to just like get a dictionary of forms. These exist. I'll drop some in the chat afterwards, after the workshop is done, but to just like read through basically encyclopedia definitions of forms, and then to see as many of these kinds of poems in the wild as you can and see how they move. A lot of the traditional forms also have specific topics kind of built into them. So like the sonnet is traditionally a love poem. And I think that kind of passion and that kind of like gesture towards romance is still present in a lot of the poems that we're seeing today, even if they're not necessarily like, you know, poems to a fair youth, right? Do you ever discover the purpose of the poem after writing it? Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of poems in branches where they began as one poem, and then I looked at it again and I was like, oh, this is actually supposed to be two different things. Or like, oh, like this, like 1/3 of this poem is actually meant for this book, but the rest of it is for the next thing. Yes. Yeah, and like all of this, I really think that like writing should be fun. Like even when we're writing about difficult topics, there should be like the thrill of actually being able to say what you mean to say out loud. I need to start talking about actual sonnet. We're gonna have a rhyming exercise later, Catherine. Okay. So yeah, research can be lots of different things. I think Carla Cordero, the poet, is in the Zoom right now. She's fantastic. She always talks about how she's reading NPR and like all of these books and books for each of her poems. There's so much work and like intellectual labor and emotional labor that goes into the backstage of these poems. So yeah, you can outline your poems, like we might do a little bit of today. You can annotate other poems. You just read about random stuff. You read in different genres. You do these free writes, and then you make these into a patchwork. And form is like the basket and container for all of these different things. Okay. So, what is what's a sonnet? What is it? What does it do? What's the sonnet? So sonnet comes from the Italian for little song. It is traditionally a love poem. This was an Italian verse form that came about in the Renaissance, so like 15 to 1600s. And then it moved over to England and like was adapted into the English language from there. So a sonnet traditionally, I'm talking about the like historical forms now, it's 14 lines long, which I'm also going to try to link. So Don Paterson, the Scottish poet, has a really wonderful breakdown of all of these different aspects of the sonnet and the history of it that I'm gonna like take pictures of from this book, 101 Sonnets. So like it starts out with a really gorgeous essay on it that like I don't have time to read all of it to you today, but I will post it on like Twitter or something after this. And his main argument is that like the sonnet is a very natural psychological form. It just sits in your brain nicely. So 14 lines is long enough for the poet to take complexity, to present complex ideas, but it's also short enough to memorize. The sonnet is written in Iambic Pentameter. So that is, that means that like, oh, hi puppy. Okay. So one line of Iambic Pentameter is 10 syllables. A syllable is the beat of a word. So Rhiannon has 3 syllables in it. Franny Choi also has 3 syllables in it, who we'll be reading later. And it's 10 syllables at the rhythm of a heartbeat, which goes unstressed and then stressed. So da 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 da. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. So English has a natural rhythm to it sometimes. Iambic pentameter is the most common like natural fluid rhythm of English. I'm using lots of air quotes because I think that like a lot of the discourse and scholarship on sonnets and like, you know, English forms in general assumes like unaccented English, like someone like speaking English without any kind of like dialect or like English as like a first language, which obviously is not the case in most of the planet. So we're not going to be focusing as much on iambic pentameter today. But the most beautiful thing about iambic pentameter is that it's also the rhythm of the heartbeat. Da 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 da. And that is like one of the bases of the traditional form of the sonnet. So the Italian rhyme scheme has an octave, which is 8 lines, octopus, 8 lines. And then it's followed by a sestet, which is 6 lines, like sesame, yeah. So it's 8 lines and then 6 lines, that adds up to 14. I'll stop talking about math soon, I'm sorry. The Italian rhyme scheme is more repetitive than the English rhyme scheme because Italian as a Romance language just naturally has more rhymes to it. It has more vowel sounds. So the octave rhyme scheme goes A, B, B, A, B, B, A, and then the sestet goes C, D, E, C, D, E. This is very similar. So this carries over into other languages with a Latin root. Like in French, when I write poetry in French, it is so much easier to rhyme. It's like crazy. So that meant that like the rhyme scheme had to change when it came over to England and was adapted into the English language, because there's fewer possible, like English has a lot of words, but it has fewer possible rhyme schemes just because it's a more consonant based language. So that meant that the structure of the sonnet changed. This was perfected by Shakespeare. Like other guys wrote sonnets in English before him, but like it's known as the Shakespearean sonnet for a reason. So the English sonnet has 3 quatrains. Daniel, stop yawning. This is interesting. This is interesting. So the English the English sonnet has 3 quatrains. A quatrain, like a quarter, right? It has 4 parts. The rhyme scheme goes A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, and then it finishes with a couplet, a couple of lines, which is GG. So two lines. So thank you, Daniel. We see the differences in rhyme schemes, right? If you're working with an English rhyme scheme, that means you don't have to find as many rhymes for one word. You can switch it up, and that makes it a lot easier, because English is like a scary monster language. So this also, there's also some difference with the Volta. The Volta, my favorite word. This is the turn of an idea, the turn of setting, the turn of complexity, like however that ends up manifesting, right, in a sonnet. The Volta is the turn. So traditionally, this happens in the Italian sonnet, like around the 8th or 9th line as the octave is switching over to the sestet. With the English sonnet, it kind of happens within the couplet. You know, we have a nice little like closing the door almost in the English sonnet. However, wow, I have so many hiccups. Okay, swallowing so much air. So like the scholarship says that the Volta happens at the couplet of an English sonnet, but if you read English sonnets, there's still a lot of like commotion going on around like the like 8th or 9th line. So just keep these things in mind. All of these are things that you can move around to fit your own purpose. And we study the rules, we study the forms so that we know which rules we like and which ones we can move against, and what it means when we do that. So now we are actually going to talk about poems, yay. Before we do, does anyone have any questions about the traditional forms? Because everything else that, like, these rules are important so that we can recognize how the poets that we're about to read reshape them. The PowerPoint is in Helvetica. Okay. So, name book of sonnets. This was 101 Sonnets by Don Paterson. And I'm going to put all of the books that I draw from on my Twitter after this. Okay, so I'm gonna need a reader. Put your name in the chat if you would like to read the first poem of today. Ivy, no, wait, Catherine, you were first. Okay. This is England in 1819 by Percy Shelley.
An old man, blind, despised, and dying king, princess, the degrees of their dull race, who flow through,
Can you see all of it?
Yeah, I can see all of it. I was just making the screen bigger, and then it gave me the pop-up thing. There we go.
Like, start over and give us some oomph. This is a poem to shout.
England in 1819 by Percy Shelley. An old man, blind, despised, and dying king, princess, the dregs of their dull race who flow through public scorn, mud from a muddy spring, rulers who neither see nor feel nor know, but leech-like to their fainting country cling, till they drop blind in blood without a blow, a people starved and stabbed in the untilled field, an army who limbericide and prey, makes a two-edged sword to all who wield, golden and sanguine laws which tempt and slay. Religion, Christless, godless, a book sealed, a senate, times or statue, unrepealed, are graves from which glorious phantom may burst to illuminate our tempestuous day.
Yay! Snaps, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love this poem. This is the oldest, like most canonical poem that we will be reading today. Percy Shelley was an English poet during the Romantic period of the mid-1800s. In England, he was married to Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, if you guys like Frankenstein. So yeah, I love this poem. Yes, the original Goth GF. This poem's great. Today I would not want to use blind as a pejorative, because that's rude and doesn't help his argument here. But this poem is so great. This poem is wonderful. So put your name in the chat for first reactions to this poem and what we see about. Okay, wait, no, I need to give some historical context. So in 1819. England saw the Peterloo Massacre. So in Peterloo, people were protesting to have equal representation in Parliament, in the English government, and they were slaughtered en masse by their own army. It was terrible. It was the culmination of a lot of violence that had just been happening within the domestic sphere of England without even thinking about what was happening, within every other country and continent that the English army was then on. And Percy Shelley saw this as the culmination of so much protest and turmoil, and wrote this rather revolutionary poem. He's calling for some fun stuff here, and I think about this poem a lot right now for whatever reason. So first reactions to England in 1819 by Percy Shelley. Just put your name in the chat. We'll call on you. Lulu.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I also really love the word Volta, and so that's what I was kind of on the hunt for as we read it. And it's a great example because it's such an unexpected turn, because he's been down on it and he's been listing his grievances, and then he's like, but we have some kind of, from all that, we can still go somewhere. There's still some like hope that we can wrench out of this and kind of learn what not to do and illumine our tempestuous day.
Yes, I'm so glad that you pointed out the Volta, first of all, because the Volta is shifty in this poem. So the phantom that Shelley talks about here, we see this in essays and other poetry that he's written. The phantom that he's talking about is revolution, is just the people coming forth and overthrowing the government. And he can say it quite ambiguously in a poem and maybe not suffer the same consequences that he would if he just started, chanting in the street. Karen.
Hello. I also wanted to, because we just finished studying A Tale of Two Cities, so I kind of related the revolution metaphor. I did not read a lot in the book, but like there was a symbol for revolution in that book too, like a lot of just repeated symbols, and yeah, that reminded me of like the revolution, like
Yes,
there.
Absolutely. Susie.
I need to unmute. I'm actually studying, or I'm doing like a 1730 to 1760 to 1830s paper at the moment. So like we've not done much poetry. I don't know, I think it's a really like effective poem in sort of like I know to be like a culturally relevant way, but the language, like the starved and stabbed, and sort of the way that he's writing like in a gesture towards emoting, which like yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, good luck on your paper. Zoe?
Hello. So I'm interested, you talked about how he's kind of trying to be ambiguous through using phantom and stuff, but like it doesn't sound that ambiguous. It's kind of fighting words, you know. So I'm wondering about like the historical context of like or the consequences of writing a poem like this, because like the first line is, you know, that's like a battle cry kind of.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. So like Percy Shelley, like as a person, was definitely protected by his class status. He also like left England and was living in continental Europe for a pretty long time, so they couldn't find him even if they wanted to, you know, attack him in the papers, which definitely helps. Is a strategy. It is a strategy. Was that Ellie who talked last?
Oh, that was Zoe. Sorry.
Zoe. Okay, Ellie.
Hi. So I really liked the idea of blood and God and things that are very individual and personal in the context of a nationwide revolution. It's kind of an internal revolution as well, and just like how it starts with you and you coming to terms with with your own beliefs and then putting that into action. And so the duality of individual and country and all of those things I really enjoyed.
Yes, absolutely. So internal revolution is really a great phrase to apply to this poem, because he's not using an English sonnet structure here. The rhyme scheme is actually Italian. And it's not just that it's Italian, it's a reverse Italian structure, right? So he starts with the sestet and then he goes to the octave, right? So just the way that for him, he saw England as like being completely upside down, where the worst people were in power and everybody else had to suffer under their rule, he turns the structure of the sonnet upside down. So we're calling that reverse form. I also want to mention a term that will come up later, which is parataxis, which I dug through my old English notes for like 2 hours today trying to remember exactly, you know, what Professor Nersessian said in my early romance class 2 years ago. Parataxis is when you have all of these clauses, all of these phrases, one after the other, with no conjunctions, with no kind of leveling. All of these things are listed at the same level. So we have the dying king, we have the princes, we have the other rulers, we have, you know, the army, we have these like ridiculous laws, we have like this terrible Senate. All of these things are bad, all of these things are hurting us, and they're listed in parataxis. Right, that phrase is going to come up later. Take notes. But also all of these things, as he reveals in the couplet, are reasons why there should be a revolution. All of these things are places where a revolution can happen. All of these things are graves from which the glorious phantom can burst to show us what we've really been living in this whole time. So last, we have time for one last comment. Okay, Candace, go, and then we will move on to the next one.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just like the reoccurring themes of things that flow as well as light and lack of light. So with the dregs of their dull race, or the muddy spring, or even like blood, which also flows, like that's that pattern there. And then also with light and lack of light, even though it doesn't really say it, I kind of just picture a faint like golden light over this scene. It's like the scene of revolution, but then also you have the king who is blind, and then those who are blind in blood, and so they are almost outside of that picture of this. Oh, and then somebody said lumen, which is I don't quite see it right now, but I think, oh, there it is. Sorry, last line.
No, that's fine.
And then it finishes off with that to kind of be like those who are in power, who are abusing their power, are no longer to have the light. It is going to be the revolution and the people who are being oppressed that are going to inherit that.
Yes, absolutely. These are such beautiful motifs that you pointed out, Candace. The light, all the things that stop and flow throughout this poem. And we have the context of the poem in the title too, which is going to come up a lot again in the other sonnets that we look at today. Where like, because the sonnet is like it's, you can expand a lot and illuminate a lot within the sonnet, but it's still a tight form. It's 14 lines, more or less. So the title, what you name the poem, can also be a place where you can give more context to it. And I love what he does here, because if, you know, without the title, this poem could be from a lot of different places at a lot of different times, right? There's a lot of commonality within this poem. With the title, there's like a dart thrown to pinpoint it exactly, but it's still expansive. Okay, we're gonna take one big deep breath. And we are going to jump 100. He uses the title as a grounding mechanism. Yes, thank you, Ellie. So we're gonna jump a few years to the 1990s in Los Angeles with the poet Wanda Coleman, who innovated the form of the American sonnet. So we talked about the Italian sonnet and the English sonnet. This is the American sonnet. Wanda Coleman is, may her memory be a blessing, a really wonderful poet, really wonderful just writer and genius among us. I was introduced to her work by the poet Harriet Mullen at UCLA, and I'm so grateful for it. There's so much here. So there's excerpts of her interview on the PowerPoint from this Global Voices Radio interview that's linked there. I really recommend reading it and getting into her work. So the American sonnet is her version of formal strategy and formal constraints. Can I have someone read the excerpt here? Who would like to read? Miles.
Hello?
Hi.
All right. Since jazz is an open form with certain properties, progression, improvisation, mimicry, etc., I decided that likewise, the jazz sonnet would be as open as possible, adhering only to the loosely followed dictate of number of lines. I decided on 14 to 16 and to not exceed that, but to go absolutely bonkers within that constraint. I also give the sonnets a jazzified rhythm structure, akin to platter, patter, and or scat, and tones like certain beat writers, such as Kerouac, Kaufman, and Prokofiev. I decided to have fun, to blow my soul.
Thank you, Miles. So yeah, go absolutely bonkers. This is what Wanda Coleman decided to do with her poetry. And here as she describes in the interview, the American sonnet for her came from a few sources of inspiration, if we can, call that. Her work was rejected a lot by like the traditional mainstream literary institutions, and it was derided as jazz poetry, and for very racist reasons, largely. Her work was really kept out of the mainstream. So she decided to take that and come up with her own form of poetry, her own formal constraints. And with the rhythm structure that she describes here, it serves as an alternative to the traditional like end stop lines. So we can have alliteration and assonance and consonants and internal rhythms and all of these ways to make the sonnet coherent as a form in its sound, without necessarily sounding like a nursery rhyme all the time, without going like full Cat in the Hat. And she also studied the traditional forms of poetry. She studied Shakespeare and Petrarch and looked at like all of these older sonnets that were happening and just used all of that to create her own entirely new form. So we're going to read one of these American sonnets and then look at like what she describes as the formal constraints. So can I get a volunteer? Ivy.
Hello. Okay, let me get this bigger. Okay. Is this just called 14?
Yeah.
Okay, 14. Summer song escaped from the coast, a mile high up its bleak and dry, Denver sky giving back no breath. I'm looted and burned, an aborted discourse on emotional colonialism, my feelings no longer my own. The cultural carpetbaggers have stolen my thunder, betrayed by Zeus, begging rescue the loneliness of cool baptismal light church on a childhood of Sundays, the whitest walls of virgin stucco, ablation, the seduction of high desert heat. On my knees I drink the wine. My heart assumes the flesh of a 2-year-old, thumps like waves rising in my chest, sleeps into wonder, drowns.
Thank you. Okay, first responses to American Sonnet number 14. Yes, wow. Brianna?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, firstly, my big reaction here is just the richness of the language and the descriptions of everything. Particularly the line that struck out to me was, I'm looted and burned, an aborted discourse on on emotional colonialism. It just really struck me. I mean, to me, it almost kind of objectifies the subject of the poem, like they aren't a person anymore, almost like they've been looted and burned, much like a shop or a piece, you know, like some sort of structure, rather than being seen as a person, being struck down. And just, it was really powerful.
Yeah, thank you. That line seems to stick out to a lot of people. In the chat, Rainisha says, my favorite line is the cultural carpetbaggers have stolen my thunder, betrayed by Zeus. Do you want to tell us more? If not, it's fine. No one has to talk. Okay, Susie says, definitely a play on body politic. Absolutely. Denver sky giving back no breath. Yeah. So much breath in this poem, right? So much musicality. Where's the line between sonnet and non-sonnet? Literally wherever you want. Like Sam Sachs, I think in his first or second book has this series where we're gonna talk about like the line between sonnet and non-sonnet later in this with Yvonne Boland's work. But the line is wherever you want, like really, like I feel like as long as you have some kind of structure and constraint that you're working in, then you can like go bonkers. Denver giving back no breath, my feelings are no longer my own. 14 because they're okay, right. Okay, thank you, Portia. So this is from Wanda Coleman's first book of American Sonnets. None of these poems in the book have like their own title. Their titles are the number that they appear within the poem. So like the first poem in the book is like American Sonnet number 1, American Sonnet number 2, etc. So this is the 14th poem within that series. So question for everybody is like, how do we see rhythm moving in this poem? Where is the rhyme scheme? Where, how does it feel? And to hear it out loud. Nora?
Yes, hello. I think that it's in the periods and just the way that the lines are shaped, like they're all very, it's not like they're short, but all of it is coming out in one breath almost. So I thought it was interesting we were talking about breath, because I was kind of looking for the places where if you were delivering this, you would breathe, because there's a lot of pauses, but they are more of like just a way to shape the poem and a way to make it rhythmically interesting. I could definitely see you pausing in places, and there was one line, I mean the I'm looted and burned, an aborted discourse on emotion, like there's rhythm in the way that you can say that. Mm-hmm. And the way that there are not a lot of these or us, it's a lot of not a lot of articles, just like words coming at you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like hearing a poem aloud isn't the only way that we can sense rhythm and sound, right? She also gives us the punctuation and the slashes and the dashes on the page. There are the stanza breaks. All of these things are also ways that your eye moves down the page. Okay, who's next? Delilah? And then one more, and then I'm gonna go back to, yeah. Delilah? Delilah, do you want to tell us? If not, it's okay. Okay. Taylor Parker says, where'd it go?
Sorry, can you figure out how to unmute?
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I was just gonna say, as far as rhythm goes, with just the placement of "on my knees I drink the wine," like reading that, the way that one line feels adds so much to it.
Yeah, there's so many turning points within this poem. Taylor Parker says that L's, R's, and I's are the carts for rhymes. Absolutely. So we see a lot of alliteration here, which is where the words sound similar to each other. They have similar consonant or vowel sounds, even if they're not full end stop rhymes. Yeah, Candace, the cultural carpetbaggers have stolen my thunder particularly sticks out for me since I recently looked into what carpetbaggers are again. Right, so carpetbaggers, like that term comes from northern politicians who moved down into the South after the Civil War during the period of Reconstruction and purported to be doing good work, but actually screwed things up a lot, similar to, you know, the Southern politicians that were already there. With Black Americans suffering the consequences. Her poetry wasn't accepted for racist reasons, and thus she decided not to play by the rules. Yeah, and made up her own, absolutely. Yeah, lots of water and fluids at the end of it. There's lots of motifs, lots of imagery. Right, gorgeous. I'm so glad that everybody's picking up on these things. We're gonna go back to an interview if I can get somebody to read. Volunteers. Kendall.
Question, how would you give the assignment to write an American sonnet? And she says, first I would explain my process. Then I would invite my students to try it, relaying their specific 1, issues, what the sonnet is about, 2, rhythms, places and devices often have them, 3, tones, shadings of attitude, and 4, musical taste, preference, rock, classical, blues, etc., how to develop the minimal language to simultaneously encapsulate and signal each.
Gorgeous. So we could talk about just this and how it manifests in her work and the work of writers who came after her and around her for hours, but I just wanted to put this here. You can see that she's still working within formal constraints. She's still giving herself boundaries to push against, even if they're not like the traditional canonical restraints. We can create these things for ourselves. We can pick and choose what works for us and keep moving. So please check out more of that interview and more of Wanda Coleman's work if you have the chance. All of these things again will be linked and resourced at the end of this and on my Twitter account. And now it is time for another brainstorm session while I also get more water. So thinking about rhyme, and this isn't you can use this time for whatever. I'm not gonna come to your house and make you write something, but think about if you have old writing that you want to edit and revise and shape into something perhaps resembling a sonnet, or if you have an idea right as we're talking right now of oh, wouldn't it be cool if a sonnet was like this? Think about that and try to outline it within the realm of rhythm and lines, and whether you want this to be a full rhyme or a slant rhyme or use lots of internal rhythm and alliteration. So I have some examples here. So outlining is something that I do a lot. It's something that I do especially when I'm working within more traditional forms, just because I can still surprise myself, right? But I don't get stuck. And I think that's what like form really does for me, is that it keeps me pushing, and like I can still discover new things about my writing and what I'm trying to say, but I'm not going to get like trapped over like what's the next line going to be, because I know the next line has to be the Volta, right? So consider it. Think about all of these things. The rhyming exercise that I do a lot, right? Like I have the start of a line. You know, I have a line, I know what maybe the last word is supposed to be, and then I just like loosely free associate with it, like literally just what rhymes with that. What rhymes with that word? What would it mean if like that word was the line that followed it, right? So just consider these things and try to outline something if you would like. I'm gonna set the timer for 5 minutes and get more water, and then we will be back, starting now. time is up. We went a little bit over because there was a squirrel in my garden about to eat from my fig tree, and I had to go shout at it. My dog is supposed to be doing that, but he's off the clock. This is a constant battle that I have with this one particular squirrel, who is the reason why I've never actually had figs from my fig tree, because this motherfucker eats them before I can. So okay. I really need this deep breath now, you guys. I was just shouting at this like, it's so bold too. He's so bold because he'll like chirp his little squirrel noises back at me. Like when I clap, he just completely. Okay, we're gonna take a deep breath. We're gonna take a big deep breath. You know the drill. I'm gonna count it off. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Ah, lovely, lovely. So relaxed, so grounded. Okay, so we're going to see another poem in the tradition of the American sonnet from Terrance Hayes. So some context. This poem is from American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin. So he uses the tradition of Wanda Coleman's poems. He uses her constraints to write his own poems. And like the poems that we saw from Wanda Coleman, right, the way that they appear in the book, you know, just being like American Sonnet number 14, American Sonnet number 7. Every single poem in this book is American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. So this particular one that we are reading, if you have your own copy, is the one on page 79. So can I get a volunteer? Billy.
Okay, can we hear me okay? Hello? Hello, okay. American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. I only intend to send word to my future. Self-perpetuation is a war against time. Travel is essentially the aim of any religion. Is blindness the color one sees underwater? Breath can be overshadowed in darkness. The benefit of blackness can seem radical. Black people in America are rarely compulsive. High fivers believe joy is a matter of touching others. Is forbidden the only word God doesn't know. You have to heal yourself to be truly heroic. You have to think once a day of killing yourself. Awareness requires a touch of blindness in self. Importance is the only word God knows. To be free is to live because only the dead are slaves.
Gorgeous. I wish I could find a recording of Terrance Hayes reading this aloud. I had the joy of seeing him read this poem at the New Eurekan Poets Cafe in New York, like 2 years ago now. And he read it twice because there are 2 ways, at least, to read this poem. I only intend to send word to my future, right? Self-perpetuation is a war against time. But also, I only intend to send word to my future. Okay, see, I'm messing it up. I only intend to send word to my future. I only intend to send word to my future self. Perpetuation is a war against time. Time travel is essentially the aim of any religion. So the final phrase of the last line, you know, the preceding line becomes the first half, right? Okay, so let's all take a moment to reread the poem with this knowledge, just quietly. Right, it's fantastic. It like this might be my favorite poem from this book. So to me, the way that he innovates the form of the sonnet, the form of the American sonnet here, is that every single line is a volta. Every single line presents a turn, presents a change in complexity, presents like a totally different argument. And we see that in the way that the phrases change over from line to line. I read this from the bottom up and it works too. Oh my God! Oh my God, Rainisha, could you read that? Could you read it that way aloud to us so we can hear? If you want to, no pressure. Rainisha, would you like to?
Sorry, the interpreter was having, yeah, sorry, I was having a problem reading, getting it for, get the interpreter getting the thing big enough to read and the sound on so that so they could read it to you. So hold on 1 second. I'm gonna get my sound on so I can read it out loud and the interpreter can just sit back and listen if we can get this all working.
Hello?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I read it from the bottom up. I started off with to be free is to live because only, so to be free is to live because only the dead are slaves. Importance is the only word God knows. Awareness requires a touch of blindness and self. You have to think once a day of killing yourself. You have to heal yourself to truly be heroic. Is forbidden the only word God doesn't know? High fivers believe joy is a matter of touching others. Black people in America are rarely compulsive. The benefits of Blackness can seem radical. Breath can be overshadowed in darkness. Is blindness the color one sees underwater? Travel is essentially the aim of any religion. Self-perpetuation is a war against time. I only intend to send word to my future.
Yeah.
That too.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rainisha. That was gorgeous. Yeah. So you actually bring up a really important aspect of editing and revising poems. This was one of the first editing techniques that I learned for working with poetry on the page from my like, yeah, right. It's so good. Everyone in the chat is losing it. So when you're revising poems, sometimes reading the poem backwards and seeing if it's just as complex, if it's just as weighted, like reading the poem backwards brings so much more energy to it. Thank you so much for reading that, Rainisha. That was a beautiful reading. So any other reactions to this? Alex?
I just feel like right now, Avery, please, thank you. The line, high fivers believe joy is a matter of touching others.
Yeah.
When
yeah, there's so many beautiful lines in this. Like each one of these could be easily its own poem, its own book, its own line of reasoning, but still there's so much movement throughout this. So what is the journey that Terrance Hayes presents here in this poem? If we can get one final comment on it before moving to the next. Sean?
It almost seems like a train of thought, like we're following his train of thought, except it has like this structure to it that's just, I don't know, it just feels like a train of thought.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful phrase for this, train of thought, because it feels so intuitive as you're reading the page, the way that the lines and the ideas link on to one another. And at the same time, it is so complex. Like, this is the train of thought of a genius, of someone who's very, very smart. but he walks us through it in such an approachable way. Like, you know what every word means on the page, even if the ideas that they represent are very complex. Oh, bye, and thank you to the folks who are leaving. The rest of this is still being recorded and like uploaded to the video, so thank you so much for tuning in. I promise you'll be able to catch up. So this is to say that poetry doesn't have to use big words and big complicated, you know, big things, big phrases, like complicated language, in order to be complex and smart and get the point across. So think about the Volta. Keep the Volta in mind, because our exercise for this one is based around the turning of the complexity. Yeah, so last comment from Noor, I love the subtle difference when you flip. You have to heal yourself to truly be heroic. You have to think once a day of killing yourself. Yeah, no, we could really meditate on this poem for a while. So next up, we are going with this poem from Kim Addonizio. Would anyone, can I get a volunteer? Anna. Or wait, no, wait, sorry. Portia put her name in the chat first. Sorry.
Okay.
You better scream this poem.
Oh, it's gonna happen. I've read it many times. Okay. To the woman crying uncontrollably in the next stall. If you ever woke in your dress at 4 a.m., ever closed your legs to a man you loved, opened them for when you didn't, moved against a pillow in the dark, stood miserably on a beach, seaweed clinging to your ankles, paid good money for a bad haircut, backed away from a mirror that wanted to kill you, bled into the back seat for lack of a tampon. If you swam across a river under rain, sang using a dildo for a microphone, stayed up to watch the moon eat the sun, entire ripped out the stitches in your heart, because why not if you think nothing and no one can listen? I love you. Joy is coming.
Great, thank you for that reading. So in the chat, I think Noor said that you didn't realize that this was a sonnet. Yes, literally. I've read this poem so many times, and it was maybe the 20th time that I looked at it, because I have it saved on my desktop so that I can read it whenever I want to. It wasn't until like I'd read it lots and lots of times that I realized, like, wait, it's 14 lines. And wait, like there's a volta after the 8th line. And wait, like, is that another volta at the close of it? So like, can someone tell us about like the way that the shadow of the sonnet works in this poem, even though it takes us, even though it's not like classified necessarily as a sonnet? Any volunteers? Any volunteers? Like, what's the movement? What changes after the 8th line? Nora.
Hi, I think that she's like talking directly to the woman crying in the stall after that slash, like the volta is, she's talking about a larger thing in the first stanza, like in the first part of the sonnet. She's talking to herself, she's talking to the world, and I think after that she's talking directly to the woman crying in the stall, and I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So the volta switches to these moments of joy. Yes, thank you, Billy Lark. So for the first 8 lines of the poem, she's talking about terrible things. She's talking about the terrible things that we go through, like all these different levels of misery and all the ways that they express themselves. for the sestet, for the closing 6 lines of the poem, it's all the way that joy manifests. It's all of these wild expressions of happiness and pleasure. Rainisha, definitely, like, the 9th line is sarcastic, like using a dildo for a microphone. What an image! Thank you, Kim Addonizio, for bringing this to poetry. Janine?
Also, when it switches to more joyous images, the line actually ends on, like, the line. So into the backseat for lack of a tampon. So you have a clean break to move on to this future of joy, which is really interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And, like, these are things that I noticed, that we notice subconsciously, right? Like, I didn't read this poem and was like, oh, this is a sonnet, and therefore this change in complexity, blah, 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 right? Like, I read that and I was like, oh my God, whoa, whoa, whoa. We notice what the form is doing, even if we can't necessarily give it the name of, like, the official scholarly, you know, structure, right? It wouldn't be a sonnet without all the lines, all the experiences. Yeah, you get both sides in a full experience of womanhood and personhood. Yeah, Lulu, absolutely. So this is just to say that, like, there's so many, the subconscious aspects of form and structure are more important than being able to name it, because this is doing the work of a sonnet whether or not anyone recognizes it as a sonnet, right? Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've cried reading this poem, because it's using the emotional momentum that the sonnet has honed over years, right? Through these formal structures. Cool. So with these things in mind, with the Volta in mind especially, think about, for whatever poem that's kicking around in the back of your mind, whatever is marinating, what does the Volta mean in your poem? Where is it going to come up at the, you know, around the 9th line, at the very start, after every single line for the closing couplet? Where does it come from? What changes within the poem? Like, maybe are you using lots of, like, water imagery at first and then you switch over to fire? Like, there's so many ways that we can manifest change. And then also, what stays the same? How do you show these things? How does it happen? How does it happen? So I'm going to start the timer. Boop, boop, boop. And don't keep that pen moving. Keep typing. Go. hello. That's our time. Oh, okay, yeah. So finish that last thought. We are at 5:30 now, so anybody who has to leave right now, it's totally fine. We're probably gonna go on for another 10 to 15 minutes, just to let you know, because I'm bad with time management. But yeah, anybody who has to leave right now, the rest of it is going to be recorded. It's going to be uploaded to YouTube, so you won't miss anything. And I'm going to post all of the resources and reading materials at the end of this. And then I'm going to take a big nap. Okay, so let's take a deep breath and then move on to our last little round. Bye. Also bye, folks who have to go. Okay. So counting it off. In, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Very nice, very soothing. We're so grounded. We're so enlightened. Okay. So for the last round, we're gonna be looking at like claiming sonnets. Like I think this whole workshop is structured around like claiming form and reclaiming form and deciding what form is for yourself and how it manifests in your own poetry. And I think that's also like very much present with the last two poets that we're reading. Of course it is. Because I made the workshop and I set it up like that. So Franny Choi, can I get a volunteer? Anna, did you read already?
Had to unmute myself.
Hi, no worries. Okay, tell us.
Ooh, sorry, I have to move closer because I can't read it. It's small.
No, it's no worry. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Does that help?
There we go.
Master of technology.
Nice, proud of you. Left church, spilled seed, licked a rock till its skin, I don't know how to pronounce that word. Sloughed off, ate from the dog's bowl, stole a 10 at least, fled from the scene, drank, killed time with fingers, fiended, fell for another, daughter, mixed up the signs, got welded, whined, wiped back to front, packed at midnight the night before, bored self to death, pictured it all wrong, fixated, inverted the colors. Culled a new excuse, called the wrong number, curled up at a bad man's feet, puked, fretted over pennies, petty, turned down the treat, trailed off, blended in, sore thumb, cords got all knotted up, frayed, faked own death, kept showing up in new clothes, new names, then leaving.
Woo. Okay, so context, yes, thank you, Janine, in the chat for saying this is from page 6 of Soft Science, her most recent collection. It's fantastic. Yeah, so I told you Parataxis was going to come up again as a phrase. So the semicolons and the way that each of the clauses follow just one after the other, and the way that the title gives context to the poem, this feels very much related to the first poem that we read today, from Percy Shelley. She uses all of these tools for her own little individual personal revolution. And like Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so for first, yes, Average Friday Night, first reactions to this poem. Candace.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, little tidbit fun fact. I know Franny Choi kind of by 2 degrees separation. Like her sister and brother went to the same church as I did, growing up. So I only got to like meet her once, and I didn't want to be all weird, like, hey, by the way, I freaking love your slam poetry. I know your siblings, but I don't know you. But anyway, just saying.
That's so fucking sweet. Thank you, Candace.
One thing to note is Franny is a queer poet as well. So when it says fell for another, and then the next quatrain is daughter, it could be like fell for another and just in general a person, but then also fell for another daughter, and that could definitely fall in the lines of being a bad daughter because like not everybody has the same open mindset about being LGBTQIA, and so that was like a kind of thing that if you didn't know about the poet, that definitely falls into it. But just the fact that she really likes to use, what was the thing again with the repeated clauses?
Parataxis. So this is where like all of these phrases are just like one after the other, not necessarily within like a formal sentence structure, just like bullet points, you know, like darts.
And she definitely likes, or definitely uses that a lot in a lot of her works. But despite all these clauses or thoughts and ideas about all the bad things she's done per se, she takes back control of the poem at the very end when she says, then leaving, because that, she doesn't even make a moral judgment on that on herself. She's like, just is taking all this baggage she just dumped out and going.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. What a way to end the poem. Brianna?
Hi. So I actually kind of wanted to build on that last point a little bit. I kind of interpreted the part that says kept showing up in new clothes, new names, then leaving. I kind of interpreted that as the subject, this quote unquote bad daughter, constantly trying to reinvent herself. Like I pictured a daughter going through different phases, like her emo phase, and then her like, you know, trying to be a good girl phase, like all these different phases of whatever she may be trying to, you know, express herself as, and like, you know, changing her outfit, changing her name, and then leaving, like that person that she was at that time exiting her life when it no longer fits her. And trying to reinvent into something else, which I kind of found to be an excellent way to end the poem, because it kind of shows that transformation into this like future self that we don't see beyond this poem.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the first line of the poem is like left church, and then she leaves again, then leaving at the very end of it. So it's this continuous cycle, and I think that's present in the punctuation of this poem as well, right? So the semicolons, like it's a break within the line, but it's still continuous. So I really like semicolons. Oh, it's such an English major, you guys. I'm sorry. The semicolon is related to the colon, which is just like the two dots. Oh my God, I shouldn't go into like a grammar breakdown right now, but we don't have time for this. Message me if you want to learn more about semicolons and what they mean. But it's a break within the line, but it's still continuous. Right? And the way that each phrase of this poem hits, it is a break, but it's still continuous. She's still going on. And that girl here, yes, yeah, absolutely. Noor, do you want to give us one last comment on this before we move on to the next?
Yeah, okay, hi. So I had thought originally that the Volta was like right at the very end, but I like gave it like a skim again, and now I'm thinking it's right where she says inverted the colors, because the poem does have a lot of the same elements repeating over and over again, and I feel like that would make it one where it's like harder to find like, well, where's the difference? But I think like you have like the two like quatrains where she's going about like, okay, well, I did this, I did that, like this is like quote unquote bad, but then you have inverted the colors, and like that's supposed to be like, okay, like I tried something new, and then these next 6 lines are supposed to, or is it 6? I can't even see, but like the next like rest of it is supposed to be like the new, and then you just find out the new like is her falling into her old patterns, which like that's fine because that's the theme. But I feel like that's where the switch really happened right after Inverted the Colors.
Yes, absolutely. So there's a shifty Volta here. Inverted the Colors. Like Inverted is really just such a big flag of change, right? An inversion, a switch around, turning it upside down. It's also where like the line actually breaks on that stanza, so the rest of it is quite enjambment. Thank you for the breakdown, Noor. And the last thing that I want to say for this poem is that like I felt that this was a sonnet, right? Because it has like 14 lines, right? Like Franny Choi is clearly acknowledging the constraints of a sonnet while like moving above and beyond them, you know, like there's 14 lines, like each line is roughly 10 syllables, and she breaks it into the traditional structure of an English sonnet. So we have like quatrains, quatrain, quatrain, and then the couplet, even without like the traditional like end stop rhyme scheme, right? Like these stanza breaks, not only do they like help move the poem forward and give it momentum, they feel very cheeky to me, like the same way that the speaker of this poem is moving, you know, within and outside of tradition and breaking the rules. This breaks the rules of a sonnet. You know, the stanza breaks to me are like, fuck you, this is a sonnet. Like, why not? Okay. Strikes me as a love poem to their formal self, to their former and formal self, yes, what they went through, etc. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing up that tradition of like the love poem in the sonnet. Yeah, absolutely, thank you. Anna, Sean, do you want to give us a last comment, and then we'll move on to our last poem, and then I will maybe let you guys go before 6 o'clock.
I just want to say, as far as the last line, I wanted to add on to what we were saying before, where it says, I kept showing up as, you know, in new clothes, new faces, new names, and stuff like that. It kind of made me think of how some people, when they get into like relationships or they even interact with different people, they'll act differently based on who they're talking to or who they're with, and they kind of change themselves to accommodate the people they're with instead of just being themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sean. There's so much to go off for this poem. It like provokes so much, and I think that like maybe one of the new clothes that the speaker is trying on is also just the form of a sonnet, right? And we can all change forms and change our clothes as much as we want to. Okay, last poem is from Yvonne Bolan. May her memory be a blessing. She passed a few weeks ago. She is just such an incredible writer. Can I get a did Lulu read a poem already today? I can't remember. Lulu, did you read a poem already? Okay, Lulu, can you read this poem for us? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, this is Atlantis. How on earth did it happen, I used to wonder, that a whole city, arches, pillars, colonnades, not to mention vehicles and animals, had all one fine day gone under? I mean, I said to myself, the world was small then. Surely a great city must have been missed. I miss our old city. White pepper, white pudding, you and I meeting under fanlights and low skies to go home in it. Maybe what really happened is this. The old fable makers searched hard for a word to convey that what is gone forever and never found it. And so, in the best traditions of where we come from, they gave their sorrow a name and drowned it.
Thank you, Lulu, for your reading. We don't have a lot of time to talk about this poem because I want to get you guys onto your last writing exercise. Yeah, they gave their sorrow a name and drowned it. Yeah. This is Yvonne Bolan. So the main thing that I want to point out here is that this poem is fragmented in its form and in its content. She's talking about ancient cities. She's talking about artifacts, things that were lost. The same way that the structure of this poem is very broken, the way that like ancient forms of writing will be translated today, like if you're familiar with Sappho's fragments. This is very much part of that, very much like in reference to the way that like we have to make do with what is left. And Yvonne Bolland also, you know, this is from her book, I think it's her most, it's not, I don't think it's her most recent book, but it came out within the last decade. Her book, Domestic Violence, which is so much about the home, but also about domestic violence within a country. So Yvonne Bolland was, I believe, the first woman to be the Poet Laureate of Ireland. She came up during the Troubles. For her, English is a colonial language. So when she's talking about the old city here, like we should keep that history very much in mind of like what has been destroyed, what has been disappeared, you know, what's left and what we're able to do with it. So if we can have maybe two last comments on Yvonne Bolland of just like what you see here. Len?
I love how she goes from like the really big picture, like huge, like arches, pillars, colonnades, all of these huge things that were lost. And then she brings it to like white pepper and white pudding and you and I meeting, and it gets like so personal. And then it goes back out to like a word and like this abstract idea. And it has this really nice flow. It goes like out, zooms in, and then goes back out again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Candace, last one.
I guess I feel like I've been rather talkative today, but when it comes to the searching hard for a word to convey that what is gone forever, on one hand, it's like, don't try to resurrect or bring back things, like let them die when they died, but also a sense of, as a poet, you are constantly searching for the right words and you want to get it exactly right, and you'll scribble and keep marking it out until it feels correct. And so that kind of feels like this, in that if you can't find the word that best embodies it, if the only thing you have is a kind of faux replacement or something that only does half the job, then they would have rather let it rest where it was than not do it justice.
Yeah, absolutely. And like this poem serves as a definition, right, of Atlantis. And also, again, like the title gives context for the rest of the poem and how we're supposed to see it and interpret it. Because, you know, truly just looking at it, there's not a lot that could necessarily point out the fact that it's a sonnet, right? It is very fragmented. The lines are fragmented. The stanzas are fragmented. It doesn't, you know, follow very many of the traditional like set structures of it that you would find on like your SAT. She tells you that it's a sonnet in the title, and that is how you're supposed to, you have to keep that in mind, right, as you see it. Okay, goodbye, Elise. Sorry, everyone who has to go. We're going over. I need to pick fewer poems for the next workshop. But okay, so if you're able to stay here, we're gonna have one last writing exercise and say goodbye. So stanza, going back to like very old Italian roots, it means room in Italian. So we build little rooms and little buildings for ourselves with these poems, with lines of poems. So for the sonnet that you are going to construct from your old writing or build anew, is this poem continuous? Is it one like big chunk, or is it broken into stanzas? Is it broken into individual lines? Are the lines even or fragmented? Are there breaks within the lines? How does this work for your poem, for the ideas that you are trying to convey, and the complexities that you want to bring forth? I am starting the timer for 5 minutes now.
Okay, that's our time. Finish that last thought. And we're going to do our last little breathing exercise and say bye.
Okay. In, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone who came today and contributed to our beautiful discussion. All of the resources and links and etc. will be posted on my Twitter. And yes, great. So final notes, this workshop is completely free. If you want, you can Venmo me or you can do the PayPal. Information is there. The recording of this workshop will be posted on the Nautical YouTube channel. If you missed anything or want to go back to it, we covered a lot of material today. You guys are incredible. I need to pick fewer poetry next time. Nautical has a discount on pretty much all of the books right now, including my first book, Branches. Email me at the email there if you have any questions or comments or critiques. And if you end up writing something and posting it, please tag me. I would love to see it. I take a very long time to respond to emails because my inbox is a big pile of yarn. But I will respond to everybody eventually. Thank you so much, everyone who came. These talks are very heartwarming. Thank you so much. Okay, workshop complete.